Another video, another callback to amazing 1997 on Windows. I mean, just check out this selection and tell me it's not great. I dare you. Go on. F-22 Raptor is the first of Novalogic's flight combat simulation games to use polygonal terrain rather than one based on voxels like they did in previous titles, which given the prompt advancements in technology made it look more realistic. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Novalogic was a well-known developer, especially for the realistic approach to simulations and focus on as true-to-life models as possible. And with F-22, they even cooperated with Lockheed Martin, the manufacturer of the real F-22, on an underlying workings of their engine for the game. That said, upon release, F-22 Raptor was quickly touted as an arcade simulation by hardcore fans of the genre because of how easy it was to fly it and perform various air maneuvers. Now, the real-life plane was pretty well known to be easier than most others to pilot too, but not as much as in the game. That said, I didn't mind it and actually prefer my simulations to be more arcadey as I perform in them much better. But I'm anything but hardcore, so don't base your opinion on it of me. Raptor features 5 linked campaigns of 7 to 9 missions each and 14 separate single missions to try your skill set. And this will take you all around the world to various locations and are dynamic in their design, meaning that if you destroy something in one mission, if another will use the same map, that thing will remain destroyed. F-22 Raptor's presentation is fantastic. Both 5-channel surround sound and beautifully rendered locations you'll be flying in are excellent. And playing the game using good headphones or a surround speaker setup on a big screen was a true pleasure for the senses. All that, however, came at the price, and upon its release, Raptor was rather power-hungry. And while it didn't require MMX CPU per se, having one could considerably boost your frame rates. In the end, Raptor can be an excellent time even today because it drops hyper-realism in favor of fun. And it is. Fun to play, that is. Which is not something that I could say about all of those older, extremely realistic games. Incubation, time is running out, is what I feel whenever I eat something with gluten and there's no bathroom anywhere nearby. The time is running out and something is definitely incubating. It was also often considered to be Battle Isle 4, even though it has very little to do with any islands and doesn't follow the same strategic gameplay formula. It shared the world and developer though, so I suppose that's the reason behind it. In reality, it's a survival horror turn-based team tactical game with some very superficial RPG elements. The campaign is played out on a series of different maps, each of them uniquely looking, but most of the time following the same objective of having to survive it all against all odds. And trust me, this will not be stacked in your favor. Gameplay-wise, Incubation is very similar to the tactical portion of XCOM games, giving your squad of units appropriate number of action points per each turn, and this can be used for movement, attacks, item use or setting up in defensive positions. I mean, if you played XCOM, you'll feel right at home in Incubation, all the way to the feeling of dread whenever a new alien is discovered. Arguably, it's a much simpler game perfecting many of the overarching concepts of the classic, featuring less weapons and alien types, so only 12 of each, but more than making up for it with scary and dark atmosphere. It was made for you to be afraid, and you will, as you're almost always leading your squad against an overwhelming enemy force. Some of those enemies are bosses that appear only once or twice in the whole campaign, so in reality the real number of different kinds of opponents is even lower than 12. All your men have their own stats, gear and weapons, and you have to remember to train them when possible to make sure that they're always up to the challenge. Story-wise, the equipment fellow in the colonial city of Sky Halawa has introduced a virus to it that caused indigenous inhabitants of it to mutate and change into bloodthirsty Sky Girl. Terrible names, I must add. They feel as if they were crafted to be tongue twisters and nothing more. I mean, the city could be called, let's say, Caprica, and aliens, I don't know, something easier like Cylons. No relation to robotic Cylons or the planet Caprica from Battlestar Galactica. These were but mere examples. The campaign is composed out of around 30 missions and will see you for the most part halting enemy attacks, trying to survive and saving any and all remaining colonists. Rinse and repeat until the end. Theirs or yours. Lens of Lore Guardians of Destiny is a sequel to 1993's Throne of Chaos, and a completely changed gameplay-wise title. I mean, it's still an RPG, but it's not using the tired grid-based movement formula anymore, but real-time fluid movement like Elder Scrolls or Ultima Underworld games. It's a rather fundamental change and one in a good direction, I feel. Anyway, your arch-nemesis from the first game, the witch Scotia, while plotting a revenge, accidentally kickstarted Belial, god of evil's resurrection. With her last dying breaths, she passed her shape-shifting powers onto her son Luther. She haven't had full control of her powers while dying though, so she passed them in damaged form. And Luther can't control what or he transforms into, and you're gonna be playing as him this time. Which, as you can pretty much guess, is a bit troublesome. I mean, let's imagine you're in an inn, having drinks with your fellow adventurers and one red-haired dwarf. I mean, you gotta be inclusive, right? even if he stinks a little. Anyway, suddenly a group of bandits raid the inn and demand payment from all the patrons. Now, naturally, you being the hero that you are, oppose them, vouching to save the innocents and kick their asses. Big time. And sometime, during a bloody and difficult combat, just when you were laying justice left and right, you transform into a tube of toothpaste. I mean, what kind of danger would a tube like that pose? None, unless someone would pick it up and start squirting toothpaste at enemy's eyes. But then, if you transform back, what would that missing toothpaste be? Your innards? Poop? There's no way of knowing. Anyway, the terrible curse aside, cause that's definitely not a gift, being the son of a hated villain, you're not the most popular person in the lands either. So, you set off on an adventure to find a way to cure yourself and also stop recently awoken Belial. On a more serious note, the only creatures you really transform into are a humanoid beast and a lizard. The first being stronger and able to smash various obstacles into pieces, and second more agile and able to cast magic spells. There are no standard per quest or kill experience points rewards in Guardians of Destiny. Instead, skills and combat styles that you use in encounters will increase upon use. It's an interesting choice and one I don't mind at all. Lands of Lore's presentation is rather nice. I mean, it's nowhere near what the best FPS games of the time looked like, but for an RPG, it's okay. And feature plenty digitized characters and assets. Overall, if you enjoy RPGs, there's a lot to like here and you should definitely give it a go. At the time of its release, MDK was considered a groundbreaking, ultra-cool and classic-in-the-making game. Those assumptions were not that far off, as the game was indeed hella fun to play, and is to this day remembered by many as one of the biggest hits of its time. Was it really groundbreaking and an all-time classic though? Well, that's another thing entirely, and something all of you will have to decide for yourself, preferably after trying it out. Personally, I wouldn't go as far, though I agree that it's great. Anyway, it's a third-person action-adventure shooter with some platforming elements in which you play a scared hectic, a cool name I must add, especially for the futuristic janitor, and you're somehow the chosen one, and the only one that can save the Earth from invading alien forces. I mean, I'm sure you've grown tired of it by now, but you really are the one to save us again. So space janitor or not, we count on you. Over the course of 6 missions, you have to destroy alien machinery that's used to damage our planet, kill their commanders, hundreds upon hundreds of various enemies, and finally their evil boss, Gunter Glatt. The level design in MDK is incredibly linear, though it never really feels like it, as the stages are all unique and full of little touches making them feel special, big and new. Each level is split into smaller stages, making you feel like you're constantly beating new challenges and progressing further, which you kinda are anyway, but this just multiplies the sensation. Now, a game like that naturally needs to have various power-ups and pickups. And it does, quite a few of these actually. And the most interesting of them all is the world's smallest nuclear bomb, that's used to open doors out of all things. Hilarious, right? And for good reason, because despite the heavy underlying plot and action-packed gameplay, MDK is actually very light-hearted and full of humorous encounters. Other than the bomb that you can pick up, you're wearing this futuristic battlesuit that allows you to glide, has a built-in chain gun that can even snipe enemies from a distance, and you'll be using a lot. Both against enemies and in some of the environmental puzzling challenges. If I was to make a tactical mistake and decide on summarizing MDK in one sentence, I'd say that it's a beautiful crazy 3D run and gunner in which you have to get from point A to point B, killing everything in your way, cause that's precisely what it is. So if you never played it, seek it out and give it a chance, you'll love it. POD Gold is a compilation release of the earlier base game POD Planet of Death and its expansion pack Back to Hell. It's also a dark dystopian sci-fi racing game unlike any other of its time. It takes place on this remote planet that's a near paradise. It's beautiful and popular, and huge futuristic cities are the only pollutant on its scenic views. That said, we would have no Dark Racer if that was all, and we do, so something must have happened. In this particular case, one of the mining machines accidentally uncovered some kind of an ancient virus, spore or fungus of some sorts that started growing at a rapid pace, quickly overtaking the planet. And at the speed that it's progressing, there will soon be no civilization left on it. So, wealthy people started leaving, there are only few seats left on the last few shuttles, and residents who were fearless were given the opportunity to compete in series of ultra-fast races for the last few spots. POD Gold comes with 16 original and 16 expansion pack tracks for a total of 32, and 16 entirely unique cars to choose from, all customizable too, allowing you to make them your own and to fit your racing style. But in reality, even though it has an interesting backstory, different vehicles and tracks, POD is all about speed. And at the time of its release, it was one of the best looking and definitely fastest racers on PC. And you know what? It's hella fun too. All tracks are uniquely designed and an arcade heaven, rewarding high-risk perfect driving, but also punishing for mistakes. So, if you're into that kind of loop at all, don't sleep on it and check it out. And yes, it's good today too. It's kinda like Wipeout, a fun timeless racer. Oh, I'm gonna earn some hate with this one. I can already sense it, with my force no less. Whatever. So, I don't particularly like X-Wing vs TIE Fighter, but before you send a thunderstorm or a wavy ocean of nerds planning my way in the comments below, hear me out. I mean, if you wanna do it, but still hear me out. I never hid that I prefer Star Trek to Star Wars, and it's not even the reason here. I just wanna get it out of the way, so we know it's not a factor. X-Wing vs TIE Fighter had a new game engine, and a pretty good one for the time at that too, much better AI than previous titles did, expanded scripting, excellent sound design and graphics, and all of it was a huge step up over its predecessors. On top of that, multiplayer allowed for up to 4 people to pew it out online, and 8 over LAN. So, since everything was so cool and feature-packed, why didn't it resonate with me? Well, because it was basically a Quake-free arena but in space. The multiplayer dogfights and various combat scenarios were excellent, and it played like a charm against a friend, a few of them, or a group of strangers. If you could play it like that. And I couldn't. For me, running it off a beaten modem on a very expensive dial-up connection and at questionable speed was nigh impossible. And single player? Well, it's hard to call few missions clearly designed to teach you how to play the game in multi a single-player campaign. And the plot encompassing it all was not LucasArts worthy, and something that I could have came up with all by myself, heavily intoxicated in a pub somewhere, eating a fatty burger and writing it all down on a greasy napkin. So, while I understand why it's so loved, I couldn't care much for it. Now, feel free to do what you will with it. The Adventures of Lomax is a spin-off of the Lemmings franchise and a side-view action platformer. You play as Lomax, a lemming knight, and the only one that has resisted wicked evil Ed's curse, turning all others into his mindless henchmen. Bada beep, bada boom, and that's how we cover a backstory in one sweep sentence. Also, there's not that much of it, so it wasn't that challenging really. Anyway, you set off on a quest to save all of your friends, find evil Ed and defeat him. You're not alone on this adventure though, as somewhere along your journey, elderly wizard Lorok will begin to help you, sharing his priceless advices. The game is divided into 4 worlds of 3 levels each and will see you defeating brainwashed enemies that have been turned into zombies, cowboys and aliens. And you do it using your signature spin attack, which is as useful in turning corrupted bad lemmings into good ones as it is for you to avoid taking damage from attacks. Interestingly enough, healed lemmings do what they did in their original game, so go straight to the nearest platform ledge and jump off of it, which is actually a common misconception as real lemmings don't do that at all. That's unimportant here whatsoever, but I believe it was worth mentioning. As you traverse through corrupted worlds, you'll be picking up scattered coins because, you know, lemming or no lemming, you have to live off something, and when plenty enough are collected, you earn an extra life. You can also find the magic helmet that will grant you a single hit immunity and some extra skills. In addition to a standard platforming fare of running, jumping and the likes, Lomax can use few of the abilities that the classic lemmings could do and some that they couldn't. So bridge building, blowing up the obstacles and throwing a flaming helmet to name a few. If you're looking at Lomax and thinking that you've seen something very similar before, you are not wrong. It was designed by Henk Nieborg, the one responsible for Flink and Lionheart, and it is graphically very similar to Flink. Since we're on the subject, Lomax's presentation is fantastic. It's colorful, super smoothly animated and sports rather big sprites and a lot of them at times. I mean, you wouldn't expect anything else from Psygnosis, but even if you did, it's always nice to see it fully realized. Sounds are pretty good too, though not on the same quality level as the graphics. Marrying of the puzzling lemmings formula with platforming was a courageous idea, and while it works on many levels, on as many it does not. So sadly, while Lomax is definitely a good game, it's not exceptional, and that's what we expected in the 1990s from every of Psygnosis' releases. Toca Championship Racing is a very fun racer. It focuses on British Touring Car Championship in particular, featuring all the teams, their cars and drivers from mid-1990s, and real-life circuits too. It's in this weird spot though. As a game that is, cause on one hand, when driving it feels like an arcade racer, granted a sophisticated one, but arcade nonetheless. And in the same time, it features realistically represented damage model, different performing and feeling cars, and real tracks. It seems like it wants to be both at the same time and can't decide which of them more. And while with many games it would relegate them to become easily forgettable, Toca somehow made it work. And while it's really neither of the two, and instead of an amalgamation of both, it works so well and it's such a riot to drive around that if you care about racing scene at all, it will be hell of a fun game to sink some hours in. It features 9 circuits of Donington, Silverstone, Truckstone, no, not the cool Genesis shooter one, Brands Hatch Indy, Outland Park Fosters, Croft, Knockhill and Snetterton. And if you keep counting them and always somehow end up with 8 names only, it's okay, you're not losing your mind. Well, at least not because of this in particular. And it's all because Donington Truck comes in 2 flavors, GP and a shorter version of it. And while this could never rival the likes of Need for Speed 2 or Screamer 2 in terms of variety and lush backgrounds, they are all distinctively different from one another. Some are bumpy, others are corner hell, while different ones may be focusing on long straights. You won't get bored in Toca is what I'm saying here. Graphics are rather nice, perhaps not on the same level as in the aforementioned hits, but you won't be complaining that they're blunt or uninspired. And the sounds are pretty good too. Music sucks a little, I mean it's not bad per se, it just don't really fit to the kind of racing you'll be doing, so turn it off, play some of your own, or just focus on the sounds, listening to the cues that can actually offer pretty useful input on what's happening around you and with your car. Toca is fun. If you like racing, it's a no-brainer. But if you're an occasional racer only, there are more enticing and better games than it available. The two I mentioned already, or even Colin McRae Rally that released few months later and was way better. Wing Commander Prophecy is the fifth in the long-running series of sci-fi space opera combat simulation games. Following Confederation's victory in the Border Worlds conflict from the fourth game, Galaxy is once more at peace. Or so it seems. And soon enough, TCS Midway, a brand new and spanking still shining and not even scratched yet state-of-the-art multi-purpose carrier, intercepts a distress call from the Kilrathi, a cat-like aggressive race of warriors and a long-time enemies of a human race. In Prophecy, you take control of Lance Casey, the whitest sounding name you've ever heard, and the most generic one too. I mean, he sounds like the guy that always stands somewhere in the background in Battlestar Galactica whenever they're sitting in Cantina and playing cards. And he's the one who's slightly to the side so that the camera only ever slightly catches him in focus. In Wing Commander, he's the protagonist. That said, and jokes aside, I love those early junky FMV sequences, so I may be kidding here, but also really enjoy watching the numerous cutscenes that are in the game. So, Prophecy starts off in the very first days of the conflict with the new alien species that's much deadlier than the Kilrathi, insectoid Nephilims. And throughout it, you will participate in various missions, patrolling areas of space, escorting other ships, search and destroy of enemy forces, and even defense of the TCS Midway. There's few different ships that you'll be flying, and the gameplay is for the most part identical to the previous games. So first-person perspective from inside the ship's cockpit. Each of the crafts has access to a different armament options, and you will need to utilize what they offer to the best of your abilities to succeed. Now, you being you, so a space combat veteran that saw hundreds of conflicts in all corners of the universe, are not someone I have to tell what to do. And I'm sure you'd win the war with Nephilims even without me. So please, don't take it the wrong way when I tell you what's required. I am aware of your experience and multiversal superhero status. All that was said to the others who watch my videos, not you in particular. Playing as the titular Wing Commander, you can obviously give orders to your wingmen and communicate with any other ship that you will encounter. Missions end when you complete your objectives and dock with TCS Midway, and after each you'll be given a performance rating. In many ways, Prophecy is a callback to the original first game, as despite being one in real life, in-game you're not this epic hero that saved the universe countless times, you're a rookie. And focus is placed on performing well in encounters rather than theatrical heroics. Same as all other Wing Commander games when released, Prophecy established a new graphical benchmark for all space simulations on the market. And given that it supports 3D acceleration out of the box, it looks phenomenal, even to this day. Sure, the spaceship models are rather blocky by 2024 standards, but if you keep in mind that there's no drag in space, ships could be of any shapes really, cubes even. I mean, look at Star Trek. Borgs had cubes, and these were some of the fastest and most dangerous ships out there. Well, on the other hand, a cube is an easy target, so I don't know. But on the other, so third by now I think hand, if a cube sustains surface damage, it's big enough to be able to withstand it, with its most crucial systems buried deep within it. Oh my god, what am I even talking about here? Never you mind at all, Prophecy looks great, plays great, and you'll be great at it. I've left the best for last. Well, best may be a bit strong word for Postal, but if you ever were stressed and wanted to let some steam off mindlessly, then there were hardly anything better in 1997. Correction, there was GTA 2. So yeah, Postal was the second best thing to relax when your boss pissed you off, when someone refused to pay you back, or when the deliveryman brought a package that looked as if he was in a wrestling match with it all throughout its way to your door. Point is, as a title to forget about your daily troubles, Postal was great. But what was it exactly rather than the tool to deal with depression? Well, it was this top-down isometric ultra-violent and disturbing shooter. The brutality it portrayed all around seemingly quiet and peaceful town was something that was not done before, and for a few good years after either. In short, you're this dude who finally lost it. You've done with being a content and law-abiding citizen? No, you wanna cause mayhem and destruction everywhere, and you will stop for nothing because you've nothing to lose. So you unleash your anger, frustration and deeply set maniacal tendencies on this small town initially, eventually the world, killing anyone that you meet. It makes no difference if they're all the ladies shopping, high school marching band, or just a couple coming back from a date night. If they're there when you're there, they'll soon be there no more. Postal does not discriminate. You lay waste to everyone and everything. Men, women, any ethnicity, animals, there's no end to your wrath, and you will not rest until you get them all. There's no point in seeking any deeper meaning of Postal spawning onto our PC's hard drives, the story behind it is superficial at best, the graphics and sounds, while not bad, are drowned in a sea of guts, gore and dismembered limbs, and it feels at times as if it was made for the shock factor only. I mean, it could be argued that brutal fatalities and blood splatters in Mortal Kombat were there for aesthetic purposes, that without them it wouldn't have made as big of an impact and become as popular, and I agree. But Postal? Oh man, it's so over the top, I don't see any other reason for its existence than to shock gamers, reviewers, regulators, or to allow us to stupidly release some Steam after a particularly stressful day. And as the latter, it actually works quite well. It's not a game you'd like to complete in one sitting over a weekend or something, as other than sick gameplay loop it offers close to no plot, but whenever something happens, you had a really bad day, there's hardly anything better for an hour or so. That said, I'm gonna share a little secret with you. All I just said up to this point is technically speaking a lie, because you don't have to do any of that at all. In fact, the way most of us played Postal is wrong. I mean, sure, the devs banked on it, that we'd do what we did, but in reality, to complete each level, all you have to do is kill the most of the hostiles. So people who actually shoot at you. You don't have to touch a single civilian or animal at all. Now that your mind is blown, how about you give it a chance and see if it's as fun when played as intended? Spoiler, it's not. I know that it seems like we're nearly done with 1997, but we're really not. And there's few more titles I'd like to talk about over the next couple of episodes or so. And yeah, they will continue for the most part being rather great. So if you're into it, you know what to do not to miss the next one. Also, let me know what you think of today's selection. Did you somehow manage to miss any of the hits from today's video back then? Drop me a line in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. Smash them if you have to, it helps more than you could ever know. Also, I would like to thank you and all my amazing Patreon and YouTube members for helping this channel keep going. And last but definitely not least, I would like to thank all the wonderful folks who record and upload playthroughs, let's plays and other retro-centric videos here on YouTube, because they help to preserve the games that would have otherwise be long forgotten. So thank you.